The martial arts expo was buzzing. Hundreds of fans, students, and instructors packed the venue. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and excitement crackled like electricity through the air. The crowd had come to witness legends, but no one expected what was about to happen. Then Steven Seagal walked in. Tall, calm, untouchable. The kind of presence that made people instinctively step back. He moved slowly through the crowd, eyes scanning the demonstration stage where Chuck Norris was warming up, stretching, calm, focused. Seagal's lips curled into a faint, knowing smirk. "Is this supposed to impress me?" he said loud enough for the front row to hear. A hush fell over the room. The chatter died instantly. Students froze mid-step, instructors paused, and even the flashing cameras seemed to blink in silence. Chuck paused mid-stretch, looked at Seagal and simply smiled, humble, unshaken, serene. Seagal took a step closer, hands behind his back, chuckling softly. "Karate is cute," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "But let's be honest, real fighters don't kick like ballerinas." The crowd gasped. Some students exchanged nervous glances. Is he really mocking Chuck Norris? Phones came out, recording every second, every word. The tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. Chuck simply bowed his head slightly, calm as ever. "I always welcome learning from others," he said softly, with a quiet confidence that seemed to make the room hold its breath. Seagal waved off the gesture. "Don't pretend to be modest," he sneered. "Show me something real, old man." A ripple of unease ran through the audience. The energy shifted, from excitement to anticipation, to danger. Every eye in the room was now fixed on the stage. Every hand paused mid-recording. Even the air seemed heavier, as if holding its breath. And then, just as Seagal's smirk grew wider, Chuck moved, slowly, deliberately, without a hint of haste. And what happened next would shock everyone inside that hall, leaving a memory no one would ever forget. The host nervously stepped forward, his voice shaking as he tried to regain control. Gentlemen, this is a friendly expo. We're here to celebrate martial arts, not..." Seagal lifted a hand, cutting him off effortlessly. "Relax," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. "I just want to see what he thinks is karate. That's all." The host gulped. The audience shifted in their seats, some whispering nervously, others holding their phones tighter, recording every word. Even the veteran instructors exchanged glances. Everyone sensed that this was no ordinary demonstration. Chuck Norris, still calm, gave a slight nod. "Very well," he said softly. "A simple demonstration. That's all I need." The room seemed to shrink. Students leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. The air was thick with anticipation. Every eye was fixed on the stage, every heartbeat quickened. Chuck stepped into position. His stance was deliberate, calm, balanced, grounded. One foot slightly forward, knees relaxed, shoulders loose, a perfect blend of control and power. His hands hovered naturally, ready but relaxed. Seagal stepped back, eyes narrowing. Then he chuckled, low and dismissive. "That's your stance? My grandmother could break that," he said, loud enough for the first few rows to flinch. A few students winced, some hiding smiles, others holding their mouths to stifle laughter or disbelief. But Chuck didn't flinch. Not a twitch. Not a flicker. His calm was unshakable, almost unearthly. Seagal raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying the tension he'd created. "I've seen better stances in karate commercials," he continued, smirking. "You call that balance? You call that control?" Chuck's expression didn't change. He looked at Seagal, then glanced at the audience. Before doing anything else, he turned slightly and addressed the room. "Before we continue," Chuck said, voice steady, commanding yet kind, "where is everyone watching from today? I want to see every face. And remember, real strength begins with respect. Respect for yourself, respect for others, and respect for the art you practice." A silence fell over the crowd. Phones were still recording, but nobody dared speak. Even Seagal tilted his head slightly, as if measuring Chuck's words, calculating if there was hidden arrogance in them. There was none. Only calm, unshakable confidence. The audience could feel it. This wasn't just about a demonstration of kicks or punches. This was about principle. About mastery. About the quiet authority that comes from years of dedication. The kind of mastery that doesn't need to shout to prove it exists. Seagal's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. The students noticed it even in the back rows. Whispers rippled through the room. "Did you hear that? Respect first, power second. This is going to be epic." Chuck shifted slightly, checking his footing. Seagal moved closer, hands relaxed but ready, clearly preparing to test what he believed would be an easy target. And with that, the tension reached a breaking point. The crowd leaned in. The air vibrated with anticipation. One move, one strike, and everything would change. What happened next wasn't just a demonstration. It was a moment that would be remembered by everyone in that hall for years to come. Chuck took a deep, measured breath. His chest rose and fell slowly, the calm before a storm. Every eye in the expo hall was locked on him. Every camera, every phone, every spectator leaned forward instinctively. Then, with the precision only decades of mastery can bring, Chuck threw a single punch. Not wild. Not flashy. Not full power. Just technical, clean, perfect. Every muscle relaxed, every joint aligned, every ounce of force focused into one point. Thud. The sound reverberated through the hall like a gunshot. It wasn't loud in a painful way but sharp, a definitive, undeniable statement. Seagal's smirk vanished in an instant. The arrogance that had filled the room moments ago faltered. For the first time that day, the calm, untouchable aura around him wavered. The wooden striking post Chuck had targeted splintered straight down the middle. Cling. Precise. Unbelievable. The splinters flew in a slow-motion arc as the crowd collectively gasped. Half screamed. Half froze, stunned. Every jaw dropped. Every camera lens seemed to shake in disbelief. Seagal blinked, stunned, stepping back a fraction. But his ego, hard as steel, refused to yield. He straightened, attempting to regain composure. Lucky hit, he scoffed, voice tense, a forced edge to it. You call that martial arts? Anyone can break wood. Chuck stepped aside, expression serene, almost amused. Then perhaps you'd like to demonstrate? He said quietly, letting the words hang in the air like a challenge. Seagal's eyes narrowed. Confidence surged back into his posture. He strode forward, stepping toward the post like a man about to reclaim control. The crowd held its breath. Every student, every fan, every instructor sensed the impending clash of pride and mastery. He reached out to grab the wooden post. And it cracked. Not under his punch, not even under his full attempt. It simply split in his hands and crumbled, weakened, humiliated before he even tried to strike. The remnants of the board fell to the floor with a hollow, echoing thump. The crowd erupted. Roars, gasps, and screams mingled together in chaos. Phones flashed everywhere, recording every second. Some fans cheered. Others were too stunned to move. Did you see that? Someone shouted. It's like the wood had no chance. Seagal took a step back, mouth tight, jaw clenched. His eyes darted around the hall, searching for a lifeline, any excuse, any way to reclaim dominance, but the room was united in awe. Even the instructors, the veterans of martial arts, exchanged nods. Respect had been earned in an instant. Chuck's calm didn't waver. He simply adjusted his stance, hands relaxed, breathing steady. The force of that single, precise punch, not only in physical strength but in principle, had set the tone for the room. Mastery was quiet, deliberate, and undeniable. The crowd continued to roar. The tension shifted, no longer a duel but a lesson. Even Seagal could no longer hide the flicker of realization. The years, the discipline, the subtlety of true martial arts, he had underestimated it. Chuck turned slightly to the audience, not gloating, just acknowledging them with a small, respectful nod. Technique, timing, control, he said softly. That is true strength. Seagal's confident facade had cracked, but the question lingered in everyone's mind. Would he step up and truly test his skill, or would pride force him to stumble in front of hundreds? The answer was about to unfold, and the crowd sensed that whatever happened next would either cement legend or shatter ego. Seagal stepped back, his face tightening like a storm cloud gathering force. The faint smirk that had dominated his presence earlier was gone, replaced by a flicker of disbelief and simmering frustration. Every eye in the room followed his movements, every breath seemed heavier as the audience absorbed the sudden shift in energy. Students whispered excitedly to each other, voices barely controlled. Did you see that speed? That power? Chuck didn't even wind up. Seagal underestimated the wrong guy. Phones captured every angle, every reaction. The entire expo had turned into a live documentary of awe and tension. A young fan, barely able to contain their excitement, stepped closer and asked, almost trembling, "Mr. Norris, how did you do that?" Chuck's eyes softened. He smiled warmly, the calm of decades radiating from every line of his face. "Years of practice and humility," he said simply, his voice carrying more authority than any shout could. The crowd leaned in, mesmerized not just by the technique but by the lesson embedded in it. Seagal's jaw clenched. Every fiber of his pride bristled. He didn't like the way the crowd was turning, didn't like the murmurs of admiration directed at the man he had come to belittle. But deep down even he knew, he could not ignore the mastery that had just unfolded before him. He took a deliberate step forward, trying to reclaim dominance, trying to show that his skill and ego were still intact. The air in the room seemed to hold its breath as he spoke, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Let's show them something real. You and me. The crowd erupted. Shouts, cheers, gasps, a tidal wave of excitement and tension filled the hall. Phones were raised higher, cameras zooming in, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. Even the instructors at the back leaned forward, some gripping the edge of tables, anticipating the collision of two legends. Chuck nodded, calm but alert, his posture impeccable. Control and respect, he said, voice steady. No egos. Agreed. Seagal's eyes narrowed, but he gave a short shrug. Just try to keep up, he said, a faint smirk returning, though the confidence behind it now carried a different weight. The audience could feel it. This was a man who had met an equal, and for the first time in a long while the ego was tested. The room went silent in that brief, electric moment. Every fan, every student, every martial arts veteran held their breath, sensing that history was being written live on that stage. Seagal took a stance, slightly aggressive but calculated. Chuck mirrored him, relaxed yet poised, grounded, ready to transform humility into force if needed. Whispers swept through the audience like wildfire. Did you see how calm Chuck is? Seagal looks nervous. This is going to be legendary. Even the cameras seemed to lean in closer. The subtle sounds of shifting feet, the faint creak of mats underfoot, and the barely perceptible rhythm of controlled breathing filled the room. This wasn't just a duel of fists, it was a duel of philosophies. Pride versus mastery. Ego versus discipline. Brashness versus years of quiet dedication. Seagal made the first move, testing, probing Chuck's defenses. Chuck didn't react immediately, waiting, calculating, reading, and controlling the pace. Every small movement, every slight shift of weight, sent ripples through the crowd. It was a dance, a silent conversation between two masters, where a single misstep could speak louder than words. The audience could almost feel the tension physically, as if the room itself was leaning forward, suspended in anticipation. Chuck's calm, unshakable demeanor contrasted sharply with Seagal's restless energy. The crowd murmured again. Technique over strength. Patience beats pride. Respect earns power. Seagal's shoulders tensed. He realized that the spectacle wasn't just about punches or kicks. The crowd wasn't reacting to him anymore, they were reacting to Chuck Norris. The quiet mastery, the precision, the silent authority, it had claimed the room. And just as the tension reached a breaking point, Chuck made his move. But it wasn't aggressive, it was deliberate, measured, teaching even in action. The crowd leaned in so close it felt like they could feel the force in the air. Phones shook in hands. Eyes widened. Hearts pounded. Even Seagal's smirk faltered, just a flicker, a crack in the armor of bravado. Everyone in that hall knew, this wasn't just a fight. This was a lesson in humility, in control, in what true mastery really looks like. The air buzzed. Every student, every fan, every martial arts veteran was witnessing history unfold, and no one would forget the energy, the tension, or the silent, unyielding respect that now filled the room. Both men faced each other, the tension between them almost visible, like electricity crackling in the air. The crowd leaned forward as one, silent, breathless. Hundreds of eyes were locked on the two legends, every camera pointed, every phone recording. This wasn't just a martial arts demonstration anymore. This was a story being written live. Chuck moved first. But it wasn't a punch, not a kick, not a display of force. Just a simple step forward. Deliberate, calm, controlled. A motion so understated yet so commanding that it caused a ripple through the front row. Seagal flinched. Just a fraction, barely noticeable to the casual observer but enough for the audience to catch it. Gasps ran through the crowd. Students whispered frantically, trying to process the subtle yet undeniable dominance that Chuck's simple step communicated. The entire front row leaned forward, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. Phones shook in their hands. Even the veteran instructors in the back seemed frozen, watching a master at work. Chuck lowered his hands, slow and deliberate. His voice was calm, steady, carrying the authority of decades of experience. "I'm not here to fight you," he said. Every word resonated through the hall. "I'm here to teach." The room went silent again. Not awkward silence, but the kind of reverent quiet that fills a space when everyone knows they're witnessing something extraordinary. Every eye was on Chuck, every ear tuned to his words, every mind absorbing the lesson. Seagal's jaw tightened. His usual confident smirk faltered. For the first time that day he seemed unsure. The lesson, the calm mastery, the humility, it all contrasted sharply with his brash, ego-driven approach. Just then the host stepped forward, holding a folder that had been tucked under his arm the entire time. The air seemed to shift once more, the crowd buzzing, anticipation building like a storm ready to break. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, voice echoing through the hall. "Today's honorary Lifetime Achievement Award goes to Chuck Norris." The room erupted. Cheers thundered, applause shook the walls, cameras flashed like lightning. Students jumped to their feet. Fans screamed. Even the instructors, stoic as they were, clapped and cheered with genuine admiration. The recognition wasn't just for skill, it was for decades of dedication, for humility, for mastery that spoke louder than any words. Seagal swallowed hard. His ego, carefully constructed over years, was being challenged not with aggression, but with respect, principle, and undeniable skill. He shifted slightly, unsure where to look, what to do, how to reclaim even a fraction of the authority he had walked in with. The host turned to Seagal, folder in hand, eyes firm but polite. "We also honor you, Mr. Seagal," he said, voice deliberate, "as long as you respect the stage." The message was clear. Respect was the key. No amount of ego, power, or reputation could replace it. The crowd erupted again, sensing the weight of the lesson. Applause thundered, some stomping their feet, others shouting respect. Respect. In unison. Chuck's calm demeanor didn't waver. He gave a small, humble nod to the audience, acknowledging their recognition, but more importantly, demonstrating that true mastery comes with humility, not arrogance. Seagal's face softened slightly, though pride still lingered in his eyes. He realized something profound. Strength is more than physical power. Respect earns admiration. Humility earns loyalty. Mastery earns quiet authority that no show of force could ever replicate. The crowd's energy was electric, as if the lesson itself had become palpable. Students whispered to each other, "Technique and humility. Respect over ego. That's what makes a true master." Chuck glanced at Seagal one last time. No gloating, no triumph, just calm, measured acknowledgement of the man beside him. Seagal, in return, nodded slightly, a silent agreement that the stage, and the lesson, belonged to the principles Chuck had embodied all along. The cheers didn't die down. Cameras continued to flash. Fans yelled, some crying with excitement. The moment wasn't just about martial arts. It was about respect, humility, and the quiet power of mastery. And as the applause echoed, the lesson settled into every heart in the room. Titles, fame, and bluster mean nothing without respect. True mastery comes not from the strike you throw, but from the way you carry yourself, the way you honor others, and the way you let skill speak louder than ego. The reveal was complete. The lesson delivered. And the crowd would never forget it. Seagal finally exhaled. The tension in his body, taut all day, seemed to unravel in a single, slow breath. Shoulders, which had been rigid with pride and ego, dropped slightly. For the first time in hours, perhaps the first time in years, he looked human, uncertain, humbled, but ready to absorb the lesson. He turned toward Chuck Norris, eyes meeting his with a mixture of respect, disbelief, and acknowledgement. "I underestimated you," he admitted, voice low, almost breaking through the layers of pride that had carried him this far. The crowd leaned in as if the very air held its breath. Chuck nodded, calm and measured. His eyes were kind, but his presence commanded authority. "Respect is the highest technique," he said quietly, each word carrying the weight of decades of mastery. The hall seemed to absorb it, every student, fan, and instructor reflecting on the statement, understanding it without question. For the first time that day, Seagal bowed. Not a half-hearted nod or a superficial gesture, a full bow. Deep, sincere, reverent. The kind of bow that tells everyone in the room that ego has been set aside, if only for a moment. The audience erupted, applause thunderous, some standing, some shouting in unison. Cameras flashed, phones captured every angle, every reaction. It was a moment frozen in time, the moment arrogance met humility and humility won. Chuck stepped closer, moving with effortless grace, and gently placed a hand on Seagal's shoulder. Not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. "We're all students forever," he said, voice steady, carrying the lesson further. "Even masters." The words hung in the air, heavier than any strike could ever be. They were more than advice. They were a philosophy, a truth that resonated with every martial artist present, with every fan watching from home. The crowd seemed to exhale collectively, sensing the resolution, feeling the tension dissolve, leaving admiration and understanding in its place. Seagal's face softened. The rigid mask of pride was gone. In its place was something rare in the world of showmanship and celebrity: humility. He looked around the room at the cheering crowd, at the students who had been holding their breath for hours, and then back at Chuck, silently acknowledging the truth of the lesson. They began walking off the stage together. Step by step, side by side, they left the demonstration area. Rivals in skill, yes, but united in spirit. Martial artists first. The audience followed, cameras still flashing, but the moment wasn't about spectacle anymore. It was about principle, discipline, respect, and mastery that transcends ego. The crowd's cheers followed them like a wave, loud and sincere, carrying the energy of hundreds of witnesses who had just seen something extraordinary. Students whispered among themselves, absorbing every nuance. Technique isn't just power, it's patience. True mastery is calm, deliberate, and humble. Respect earns more than fear ever could. Seagal, walking beside Chuck, finally allowed himself a small smile. Not triumphant, not arrogant, but genuine, the smile of someone who had just realized a hard truth. It wasn't about winning, it wasn't about proving dominance. It was about learning, growing, and understanding that mastery is measured not by how hard you hit, but by how well you carry yourself and honor others. Chuck glanced at Seagal, a quiet nod passing between them, a silent acknowledgement that this lesson was mutual. Both men in their own ways had learned something that day. And as they exited the stage, the crowd erupted once more, capturing the final images, the last cheers, and the memory of a day that would be told for years to come. The host stepped forward, adjusting the microphone, the applause fading to an appreciative murmur. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice carrying over the hall, "what you witnessed today wasn't just martial arts. It was a lesson in respect, humility, and mastery. A reminder that even the greatest can learn, and that true power lies in the heart, not in the ego." The students nodded, absorbing every word. Fans whispered, replaying the moves and words in their minds. And somewhere in the back, instructors smiled knowingly, recognizing that what they had just witnessed would be remembered as a defining moment in martial arts history. Chuck and Seagal disappeared backstage, leaving behind a stage filled with cheers, applause, and a lesson that no one would forget. Rivalry had been replaced by respect. Pride had been tempered by humility. And the crowd knew without a doubt that true mastery is silent, deliberate, and earned through dedication, patience, and honor. Respect doesn't come from titles. It doesn't come from fame, money, or the size of your audience. Power doesn't come from ego, from shouting, or from showing off. True mastery doesn't come from mocking others, proving who's better, or attempting to intimidate. Real mastery comes quietly, from learning, from improving, from staying humble even when the world expects you to boast. We witnessed it today. A single, controlled punch shattered wood, but it wasn't just strength that impressed everyone in that hall. It was control. Precision. Years of discipline distilled into one calm, deliberate action. That punch told a story, yes, but it wasn't the story of brute force. It was the story of patience, focus, and respect for the art itself. Seagal thought confidence alone could command the room. He thought ego could dominate. And for a moment it almost did. But one lesson from Chuck Norris reminded everyone present, and everyone watching, that true mastery is more than what the eyes can see. Humility has a power that brute strength cannot touch. One humble bow can silence arrogance. One calm smile can undo years of bluster. One quiet step can command more attention than 1,000 loud boasts. And the crowd saw it. Hundreds of witnesses, thousands more through recordings, all understanding that what they were witnessing was more than martial arts. It was a lesson in life. Even rivals, even those with pride thicker than steel, can choose respect over ego. Seagal, for all his fame and skill, left the stage changed, not because he had been defeated in a fight, but because he had been shown the quiet, unshakable authority of mastery rooted in respect. Chuck Norris didn't need to prove anything. He didn't need to boast. He simply embodied the principles he taught, and the lesson was unforgettable. And that's the takeaway for every martial artist, every student, every fan watching. Your skill means nothing if it isn't paired with humility. Your achievements mean little if you cannot honor others along the way. True strength begins in the heart, in how you treat others, how you carry yourself, and how you choose to respond when the world tests you. One punch can break a board. One arrogant word can shatter respect. But humility, genuine, deliberate humility, can break arrogance, silence ego, and command attention far louder than any display of force ever could. So today as you watch, remember this. It's not about showing everyone you are strong. It's about being strong enough to show respect. It's not about proving superiority. It's about lifting others, staying disciplined, and letting your actions, not your ego, speak for you. The hall erupted with applause when the lesson was delivered. Students cheered. Fans whispered. Even those who had come expecting spectacle left with wisdom. And the cameras? They captured every subtle gesture, every calm step, every humbling bow, a lesson immortalized for anyone willing to see it. Type respect in the comments if you believe martial arts, and life itself, begins in the heart, not the fists. Collision folded hands. And tell me where you're watching from. I want to salute every warrior who chooses humility over pride, mastery over ego, and respect over showmanship. Today we learned that the greatest victories aren't won with force. They're won with quiet dignity, with control, and with the courage to honor others even when you could easily boast. Remember, one punch may break a board, but humility breaks arrogance. One calm word may defuse conflict, one respectful gesture may earn loyalty, and one moment of patience may inspire thousands. Carry that lesson into your own life. Step forward with confidence, yes, but temper it with respect. Strike with skill, yes, but let humility guide your hand. And always, always remember, mastery is silent. True power speaks softly. It doesn't need an audience to prove it exists. Type respect if you understand, share this lesson with others, and honor every master, teacher, and student who reminds the world that greatness isn't measured by ego, it's measured by heart.